The mystery of history. Who killed Lord Darnley? So today we are going to be learning to interpret historical evidence. That means to understand key facts from the past. Success criteria. I can ask questions about events in the past, and I can come up with my ideas about what happened in the past. That will be through using the evidence put before you. You are going to be a detective. Let's have a look at the background information. It will probably help if you read along with me. Darnley's wife Mary had become Queen of Scotland when her father, James V, died less than a week after her birth in 1542. To avoid being forced into a marriage with the English prince, Mary was sent to grow up in France. By the time she reached the age of 18, she had already married and lost her first husband. She returned to Scotland. Mary married Darnley in 1565 and they had a son together, James, the following year. This is the crime. Again, read along with me. In the early hours of the morning on Sunday, 10th of February, 1567, the people of Edinburgh were woken by the sounds of a terrible explosion. Coming out to see what had happened, they found that an old house known as Kirkhope Fields had been blown up. What was even more shocking was that Darnley had been staying there, and it was his half-naked body, along with the corpse of his manservant, that were discovered in the garden. There didn't seem to be a trace of the explosion on either body. How had Darnley died? Evidence. A sketch of the crime scene on the 10th of February 1567 drawn shortly after that night. Have a look. What can you see? Do you have any questions based on this sketch of the crime scene? This drawing is primary evidence. It was drawn around the time of Darnley's death. Look closely at this piece of evidence. What questions would you ask? Now remember, you can go back, rewind the video, have another look before we move on to the slide. Did you come up with some questions? These would have been some examples of good detective questions. Read along with me. Who drew the picture? When was the picture drawn? Did they see the murder? Because if they saw the murder and they drew the picture, would it be more accurate than somebody who didn't see the murder but drew the picture? Have you come up with any more good detective questions? This is some more evidence. Lord Darnley was called selfish, weak, nasty and vain by people who knew him. Vain means that he really loved himself. Let's continue. The English Queen Elizabeth I wasn't happy that her cousin Mary had married Darnley. Darnley went off with lots of other women. Darnley was very jealous. He had helped her murder Riccio, Mary's assistant. Darnley thought that Mary liked Riccio. Darnley was Catholic. This is Mary's letter to Bothwell. It's a modern translation so that we can understand it. Let's read it together. To be short, he will go anywhere I want, alas. I won't have to deceive anybody. I will do whatever you want. Send me word of what I should do, and whatever happens to me, I will obey you. He is very suspicious and fearful for his life, but nevertheless trusts my word. All his friends always come with me when I go to visit him. The bearer of this letter will tell you the rest, and if I learn anything every night, I will keep a record of it. Burn this letter, for it is dangerous. God forgive me, and give you, my old friend, the good luck that your humble and faithful lover wishes unto you. who hopes that shortly to be another thing unto you, for the reward of my pains. So this is a letter from Mary to Bothwell, and it was found in March 1567. Do you have any new questions? Do you have any new thoughts about what happened to Darnley? Is Mary innocent? Read with me. On Christmas Eve 1566, Darnley had become seriously ill. Mary persuaded him to travel to Kirkhofield in Edinburgh so that he could get better. Some people thought this was strange, as Mary now hated Darnley. At around 2 a.m. on 10th of February 1567, a massive explosion reduced Kirkhofields to rubble. Darnley's body, still in his nightclothes, was found in the garden not far from the house. His dead manservant lay next to him, and a chair, a cloak, and dagger were also nearby. Do you have any more questions? Any more thoughts with this information? Witnesses. So you may have watched crime programs before, and police do take witness statements from people who may have seen the crime committed. These statements were taken on the 11th of February 1567. Can you read with me? May Crockett says that she was lying in a house between 2 and 3 when the explosion happened. She thought it was the house above. She ran to the door and saw 11 men coming out from Friars Lane. She grabbed one by his jacket, which was made of silk, and asked what happened. They made no answer. Probably an expensive jacket if it was made of silk. Let's move on to the next witness statement. Barbara Mertine says that she was at her window before the explosion. She heard 13 men come out of Friars Lane and go up another. Then she heard the explosion and 11 men came back. 13 men out of the lane, going up another explosion, and then 11 coming back. That means 2 people were missing. Suspects. Read with me. After the explosion, people began talking about who the suspects might be. Over the next few weeks, a number of people were suspected. That means people thought that they might have committed the crime. Can you remember who that was? Mary, Queen of Scots. Earl Bothwell. Who are these people? Scottish lords, the Riccio murderers, the people who murdered Riccio, and Stuart, the Earl of Moray, was also a suspect. So now you've seen all of that evidence, what do you think actually happened to Lord Darnley? Because your learning intention was to interpret all that evidence. You might even want to rewind the video and have another look at the evidence. That's what a good is. And then based on this evidence, what do you think actually happened to Lord Darnley? I wonder if what you think happened to Lord Darnley is the same as what other people or historians think happened to Lord Darnley. Now, a historian is somebody who studies history. Let's see what they think. On the night of 10th of February, Mary left to attend a wedding party while Darnley stayed at home. At about 2 a.m., a massive explosion reduced Kirkhofield House to rubble. Now, that time of 10 a.m. actually fits in, doesn't it, with the witness statement. Darnley was killed, but not by the explosion. Remember, he didn't have any gunpowder on him, did he? Maybe that's why the historians think that. He was found half naked, not in the rubble of the house, but in the garden outside the town walls. We saw that on the drawing. Something had frightened him so badly that he had escaped from the house before it exploded. But someone saw him fleeing, caught up with him, and killed him. The list of suspects was long because Darnley had many enemies. Oh, yes, that would have made it harder for the detectives. However, many people suspected that Mary and her friend Earl Bothwell had arranged the murder. When Mary married Bothwell 3 months later, it looked as though the suspicions were right. The Scots rose in rebellion. Mary was driven out to England, and her son James was made king. Elizabeth I made her a prisoner. A prisoner she stayed for 19 years. So your task is to choose one of the options which will be in the daily plan that should say on Teams. Good luck with your learning today.